In America, it's often said that money makes the world go round. Indeed, the country's economic engine is fueled by capitalism, a system that prioritizes the pursuit of profit above all else. While capitalism has fueled remarkable economic growth and innovation, it also has inherent flaws that fail to account for the needs of society's members. At the heart of capitalism lies the principle of maximizing profits, often at the expense of broader societal concerns. Corporations, the cornerstone of capitalism, are structured to prioritize the interests of shareholders above all else. With limited liability and a legal obligation to maximize returns for shareholders, corporations are incentivized to prioritize short-term gains over long-term societal impacts. Limited liability shields shareholders from personal financial liability for the debts and obligations of the corporation, allowing them to reap the rewards of profits without bearing the full consequences of corporate misdeeds. This creates a moral hazard wherein corporations can engage in risky or unethical behavior with impunity, knowing that the potential downsides will be borne by others. Furthermore, the relentless pursuit of profit often leads corporations to overlook the broader societal implications of their actions. In their quest to increase shareholder value, corporations may exploit workers, disregard environmental regulations, and prioritize cost-cutting measures that compromise product safety and consumer well-being. In this paradigm, the needs of society's members are often sidelined in favor of maximizing corporate profits. From income inequality to environmental degradation to the erosion of social cohesion, the consequences of prioritizing profit over people are profound and far-reaching. As we navigate the complexities of America's capitalist system, it is essential to critically examine the role of corporations and the broader economic forces at play. Only by acknowledging the inherent shortcomings of capitalism and working to address them can we hope to create a more just, equitable, and sustainable society for all. In the bustling corridors of corporate power, the pursuit of profit often takes precedence over the well-being of society. Defined by an insatiable hunger for wealth and influence, corporate greed has woven its tendrils into the fabric of our economic system, threatening to unravel the very foundations upon which it stands. At its core, corporate greed manifests as the relentless pursuit of profit at any cost, often neglecting the needs of workers, consumers, and the environment in its wake. It represents a dangerous imbalance, where the interests of a few outweigh the welfare of the many. Yet, in the relentless quest for growth and expansion, the consequences of this unchecked ambition are often swept aside. As we delve deeper into the murky waters of corporate greed, it becomes evident that its ramifications extend far beyond the boardroom. From exploitative labor practices to environmental degradation, the tendrils of corporate greed reach into every facet of society, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. But before we explore these dangers in detail, it is essential to understand the scope of corporate greed and its implications for society as a whole. Only then can we begin to address this pressing issue and strive for a more equitable and sustainable future. In the pursuit of ever-increasing profits, corporations often resort to exploitative labor practices that prioritize cost-cutting measures over the well-being of workers. From sweatshops in developing countries to precarious working conditions in factories closer to home, the human toll of corporate greed is starkly evident. One glaring example is the Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh in 2013, where over 1,100 garment workers lost their lives due to unsafe working conditions. The tragedy shed light on the exploitative practices rampant in the fashion industry, where workers are subjected to long hours, low wages, and hazardous environments, all in the name of maximizing profits for multinational corporations. Furthermore, corporate greed often comes at the expense of the environment, as companies prioritize short-term gains over long-term sustainability. From deforestation to pollution, the relentless pursuit of profit has led to irreversible damage to our planet, threatening the very ecosystems upon which life depends. Take, for instance, the case of ExxonMobil, which knowingly misled the public about the dangers of climate change for decades, all to protect its bottom line. By prioritizing profits over environmental stewardship, corporations like ExxonMobil have contributed to the escalating climate crisis, endangering future generations in the process. Moreover, corporate greed exacerbates income inequality by concentrating wealth and power in the hands of a select few, while leaving the majority of workers struggling to make ends meet. As CEO salaries skyrocket to astronomical heights, workers are left to contend with stagnant wages and diminishing benefits, widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots. In the relentless pursuit of profit, corporations often trample on the rights and dignity of workers, exploit natural resources with impunity, and perpetuate economic inequality on a global scale. It is imperative that we confront these injustices head-on and hold corporations accountable for their actions. Only then can we begin to build a more just and equitable society for all. Beyond its economic implications, corporate greed exacts a heavy toll on society, undermining the well-being of communities and eroding the fabric of social cohesion. One of the most glaring consequences of corporate greed is the neglect of consumer safety and health in the relentless pursuit of profit. Time and again, we have witnessed corporations prioritize short-term gains over the long-term well-being of their customers, leading to disastrous consequences. Consider the case of Purdue Pharma, which aggressively marketed OxyContin while downplaying its addictive properties, contributing to the opioid epidemic that has ravaged communities across the United States. In their pursuit of profit, Purdue Pharma and other pharmaceutical giants fueled a public health crisis, leaving countless lives shattered in their wake. Moreover, corporate greed undermines the vitality of communities by prioritizing profit over social responsibility. From the closure of local businesses to the outsourcing of jobs overseas, corporations often prioritize their own interests at the expense of the communities they operate in, leaving behind a trail of economic devastation and social dislocation. Furthermore, corporate greed poses a threat to democratic principles by exerting undue influence over the political process. Through lobbying, campaign contributions, and other forms of political influence, corporations seek to shape public policy in their favor, often at the expense of the common good. The Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United v. Feck, which granted corporations the same free speech rights as individuals and opened the floodgates for unlimited corporate spending in elections, is a stark example of corporate influence run amok. By allowing corporations to wield outsized influence over the political process, we undermine the democratic principles upon which our society is built, further entrenching corporate power and privilege. In the face of these challenges, it is imperative that we reclaim our democracy from the grip of corporate interests and hold corporations accountable for their actions. By demanding greater transparency, accountability, and corporate responsibility, we can begin to build a more just and equitable society for all. Corporate greed often leads to the flouting of laws and regulations designed to protect the public interest, as companies prioritize profit over ethical and legal considerations. One common manifestation of corporate greed is through fraudulent practices aimed at deceiving consumers, investors, and regulators. The Enron scandal, one of the most infamous cases of corporate fraud in history, serves as a stark reminder of the dangers posed by unchecked corporate ambition. Through accounting fraud and other deceptive practices, Enron executives misled investors and regulators about the company's financial health, ultimately leading to its spectacular collapse and the loss of billions of dollars for shareholders. Furthermore, corporate greed often manifests through tax evasion and avoidance schemes aimed at minimizing tax liabilities and maximizing profits. From offshore tax havens to complex corporate structures designed to exploit loopholes in the tax code, corporations routinely engage in aggressive tax planning strategies to shift profits to low-tax jurisdictions and avoid paying their fair share. The Paradise Papers and Panama Papers leaks laid bare the extent of corporate tax dodging on a global scale, highlighting the need for greater transparency and accountability in corporate tax practices. Moreover, corporate greed can take the form of monopolistic behaviors aimed at stifling competition and maintaining market dominance. From price-fixing schemes to anti-competitive mergers and acquisitions, corporations often engage in anti-competitive practices to eliminate rivals and consolidate their power. The antitrust lawsuits against tech giants like Google and Facebook underscore the dangers posed by unchecked corporate power and the need for robust antitrust enforcement to promote competition and innovation. Additionally, corporate greed has been evident in industries like tobacco and soft drinks, where companies have prioritized profits over public health. Cigarette companies, for example, have long been accused of deceptive marketing practices aimed at hooking consumers, despite knowing the health risks associated with smoking. The landmark lawsuit against tobacco companies in the 1990s, which resulted in the Master Settlement Agreement, exposed decades of misconduct and led to significant changes in the regulation of the tobacco industry. Similarly, soft drink companies have faced scrutiny for their role in the obesity epidemic, as they market sugary beverages to children and adolescents while downplaying the health risks associated with excessive consumption. The Coca-Cola Company, for instance, has been criticized for funding research that downplays the link between sugary drinks and obesity, highlighting the ethical dilemmas inherent in corporate-sponsored research. Moreover, the Sackler family, owners of Purdue Pharma, have come under fire for their role in fueling the opioid epidemic through aggressive marketing of OxyContin. Despite knowing the addictive properties of the drug, Purdue Pharma continued to push OxyContin on doctors and patients, leading to widespread addiction and overdose deaths. The Sackler family's relentless pursuit of profit at the expense of public health has sparked outrage and calls for accountability, culminating in lawsuits and settlements aimed at holding them responsible for their actions. In the face of rampant corporate greed, it is essential that we strengthen laws and regulations aimed at holding corporations accountable for their actions. By cracking down on corporate fraud, tax evasion, anti-competitive practices, and deceptive marketing, we can ensure that corporations operate in the public interest rather than solely for private gain. Examining specific cases sheds light on the devastating consequences of corporate greed and the laws they break. These examples serve as cautionary tales, highlighting the need for vigilance and accountability in the corporate world. The Enron scandal remains one of the most notorious examples of corporate greed and financial misconduct. In the early 2000s, Enron, once lauded as one of America's most innovative companies, collapsed in spectacular fashion due to rampant accounting fraud and deceptive practices. Executives at Enron used off-balance sheet financing and fraudulent accounting techniques to conceal massive losses and inflate the company's financial performance, deceiving investors and regulators alike. The fallout from the Enron scandal was profound, leading to the dissolution of Arthur Andersen, one of the world's largest accounting firms, and prompting sweeping reforms in corporate governance and financial reporting. In 2015, Volkswagen shocked the world when it was revealed that the company had installed illegal software in millions of diesel vehicles to cheat emissions tests. By manipulating emissions data, Volkswagen was able to evade environmental regulations and portray its vehicles as cleaner and more environmentally friendly than they actually were. The scandal not only tarnished Volkswagen's reputation but also raised serious questions about the integrity of the automotive industry and the efficacy of regulatory oversight. Volkswagen ultimately faced billions of dollars in fines and settlements, highlighting the steep price of corporate misconduct. The Sackler family, owners of Purdue Pharma, found themselves at the center of controversy amid the opioid epidemic gripping the United States. Purdue Pharma aggressively marketed OxyContin, a powerful opioid painkiller, while downplaying its addictive properties and overstating its benefits. As a result, OxyContin became widely prescribed, contributing to the opioid crisis that has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. The Sackler family's relentless pursuit of profit at the expense of public health has sparked outrage and legal action, with numerous lawsuits and settlements aimed at holding them accountable for their role in fueling the epidemic. These case studies underscore the dangers of corporate greed and the laws that are broken in its pursuit. From financial fraud to environmental deception to public health crises, the consequences of unchecked corporate ambition are far-reaching and profound. It is imperative that we learn from these examples and take decisive action to ensure that corporations are held accountable for their actions, and that the needs of society are prioritized over the interests of the few. The consequences of corporate greed extend far beyond financial penalties and legal repercussions, leaving a lasting impact on society and the economy. From loss of public trust to irreparable damage to corporate reputations, the fallout from corporate misconduct reverberates through communities and institutions alike. Corporate scandals erode public trust in institutions and undermine confidence in the fairness and integrity of the economic system. When companies prioritize profit over ethical considerations, they betray the trust of consumers, investors, and employees, leading to a breakdown in relationships and a loss of faith in corporate leadership. The Enron scandal, for example, shattered investor confidence and tarnished the reputation of the entire accounting profession, highlighting the corrosive effects of corporate fraud on public trust. Corporate misconduct often results in significant legal consequences, including fines, penalties, and settlements. Companies found guilty of fraud, environmental violations, or other unlawful practices may face hefty fines and legal fees, draining resources and damaging profitability. In the case of Volkswagen, the company faced billions of dollars in fines and settlements following the emissions scandal, leading to a sharp decline in stock value and shareholder confidence. Perhaps the most enduring consequence of corporate greed is the long-term damage to corporate reputation and brand image. Once a company's reputation is tarnished by scandal or misconduct, rebuilding trust and credibility becomes an uphill battle. Consumers may boycott products, investors may divest from the company, and talented employees may seek employment elsewhere, further exacerbating the damage. The fallout from the Purdue Pharma opioid scandal, for instance, has led to widespread public outrage and calls for boycotts of the company's products, tarnishing the Sackler family's reputation and legacy in the process. The consequences of corporate greed are profound and far-reaching, affecting individuals, communities, and society as a whole. From loss of public trust to legal ramifications to irreparable damage to reputation, the fallout from corporate misconduct is felt across every sector of the economy. It is incumbent upon corporations to prioritize ethical behavior and social responsibility, and for regulators and stakeholders to hold them accountable when they fail to do so. Only through transparency, accountability, and a commitment to the common good can we begin to address the systemic issues underlying corporate greed and ensure a more equitable and sustainable future for all. Addressing the dangers of corporate greed requires a multifaceted approach that encompasses regulatory reform, corporate accountability, and societal change. By implementing targeted solutions, we can begin to mitigate the harmful effects of unchecked corporate ambition and foster a more ethical and responsible business environment. One of the most effective ways to combat corporate greed is through robust regulatory oversight and enforcement. Governments must enact and enforce laws that hold corporations accountable for their actions, imposing stiff penalties for fraud, environmental violations, and other unlawful practices. Additionally, regulatory agencies must be adequately funded and empowered to investigate corporate misconduct and ensure compliance with existing regulations. By strengthening regulatory oversight, we can deter corporate malfeasance and protect the public interest. Corporations must take responsibility for their impact on society and the environment, adopting ethical business practices that prioritize the well-being of all stakeholders. This includes implementing corporate social responsibility (CSR) initiatives that address social, environmental, and governance concerns such as sustainability, diversity and inclusion, and community engagement. By embracing CSR, companies can demonstrate their commitment to ethical behavior and earn the trust and loyalty of consumers, investors, and employees alike. At a fundamental level, addressing corporate greed requires a cultural shift within the business community that values ethics and integrity above short-term profits. Business leaders must lead by example, fostering a corporate culture that prioritizes transparency, accountability, and ethical decision-making at every level of the organization. This may involve implementing codes of conduct, whistleblower protections, and ethical training programs to ensure that employees understand and adhere to ethical standards. By promoting a culture of ethics and integrity, companies can build trust with stakeholders and contribute to a more sustainable and equitable future. The dangers of corporate greed are real and far-reaching, but they are not insurmountable. By implementing targeted solutions that strengthen regulatory oversight, promote corporate responsibility, and foster ethical business practices, we can begin to address the systemic issues underlying corporate misconduct and build a more just and sustainable economy for all. It will require collaboration and cooperation among governments, businesses, and civil society, but the stakes are too high to ignore. Together, we can create a future where corporations prioritize the needs of society over the pursuit of profit, and where ethical behavior is the norm rather than the exception. As we reflect on the perils of corporate greed and the laws they break, it becomes clear that the consequences of unchecked ambition extend far beyond the confines of the boardroom. From economic exploitation to social upheaval to legal violations, the ramifications of corporate misconduct are felt across every sector of society, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Yet, amid the darkness, there is hope. By shining a light on corporate greed and holding corporations accountable for their actions, we can begin to address the systemic issues underlying corporate misconduct and pave the way for a more just and equitable future. Through regulatory reform, corporate responsibility initiatives, and the promotion of ethical business practices, we can build a business environment that prioritizes the needs of society over the pursuit of profit. It will require courage, determination, and collective action, but the rewards are too great to ignore. As we move forward, let us remember that the power to effect change lies in our hands. By demanding transparency, accountability, and corporate responsibility, we can create a world where businesses serve as stewards of the common good rather than agents of greed. The journey ahead will not be easy, but it is a journey worth taking. Together, let us build a future where corporate greed is no longer tolerated, and where the needs of society take precedence over the narrow interests of the few. Only then can we truly fulfill the promise of a better tomorrow for generations to come. While combating corporate greed requires systemic changes and collective action, individual citizens also play a crucial role in mitigating these issues. Here are several steps citizens can take to hold corporations accountable and promote ethical business practices. Stay abreast of current events and developments in the corporate world. Educate yourself about the practices and policies of the companies you support as a consumer or investor. Knowledge is power, and being informed allows you to make more ethical and responsible choices. Choose to support companies that prioritize ethical business practices, sustainability, and social responsibility. Look for certifications such as B Corp certification or Fair Trade certification, which indicate a commitment to ethical standards. By voting with your dollars, you can send a clear message to corporations that ethical behavior matters. Get involved in advocacy efforts aimed at promoting corporate accountability and transparency. Support initiatives that push for regulatory reform, corporate governance reforms, and greater corporate disclosure requirements. Write to your elected representatives, sign petitions, and join grassroots movements advocating for corporate responsibility. Hold corporations accountable for their actions by speaking out against unethical behavior and demanding transparency and accountability. Use social media and other platforms to raise awareness about corporate misconduct and mobilize others to take action. Share information about boycotts, shareholder activism campaigns, and other strategies for holding corporations accountable. Consider incorporating environmental, social, and governance (ESG) factors into your investment decisions. Invest in companies that demonstrate a commitment to sustainability, diversity, and ethical business practices. Consider divesting from companies that engage in unethical behavior or contribute to social and environmental harm. Advocate for stronger regulations and enforcement mechanisms to hold corporations accountable for their actions. Support candidates and policymakers who prioritize corporate accountability and transparency and who are willing to take action to address corporate greed and misconduct. Engage in consumer activism by boycotting companies that engage in unethical behavior or contribute to social and environmental harm. Support companies that are transparent about their business practices and demonstrate a commitment to ethical standards. Encourage others to join you in making ethical consumer choices. Reflect on your own consumption habits and lifestyle choices and consider how they contribute to or mitigate corporate greed. Look for opportunities to reduce your own consumption. Support sustainable and ethical products and businesses, and advocate for positive change in your community and beyond. By taking these actions, individual citizens can contribute to the fight against corporate greed and help build a more just, equitable, and sustainable future for all. Remember that small actions can add up to make a big difference, and that together, we have the power to hold corporations accountable and promote positive change. Thank you for watching. My channel, known as the Renaissance Spirit, is dedicated to the pursuits of a just, equitable, and humanitarian world. Video topics encompass areas including history, politics, religion, personal development, society, culture, social and environmental justice, and other topics of liberal arts and sciences, including ancient Rome and the Roman Empire, which is a great comparison and contrast of the modern world. Topics perfect for the true modern polymath. The Renaissance ushered in a golden age in the pursuit of knowledge both lost to time and yet to be discovered. It gave birth to the Enlightenment and the Age of Reason. Embracing truth, knowledge, and an understanding and compassion for humanity opens up the world to each of us individually and improves all of humanity, affording us the opportunity to be better stewards of the earth and to each other. The Renaissance spirit, more than just a philosophy or style, but a style for living, learning, growing, and thinking. Please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share. If you're looking to explore and experience what life has to offer, I'm sure you'll enjoy the other videos on my channel. Please peruse, and let me know in the comments what you get out of them and what other videos you'd like to see. But first, please take the quiz next to see if you're a Renaissance spirit. Live the Renaissance spirit.